My name is James Norton Jr. And I was born in New Brockton, Alabama on August 18th, 1947, 3/4 of a century. I was raised by my grandparents, uh, John and Rose McGowan. My mother uh, went to Detroit, Michigan during the Great Migration, and my grandfather insisted that she leave me there with, with my grandparents. I had a normal childhood. I was the only kid. It's, it was typical for what blacks had at that time. Very basic. Uh, Initially, we had no running water, uh, which means our toilet was an outhouse. Uh, our heat was a fireplace, which meant you had to been within 2 feet to actually receiving the any warmth from the heat. Sometimes it would get cold enough in the house that the bucket of water that we had in the house for drinking water would have an ice cap on the top of it the next morning. But for the people around me, this was normal and typical. And so to me, it was just life. We had a television, and I can remember watching. Used to watch westerns on television. On Friday nights, my grandfather and I would watch the Friday night fights. Uh, Another thing I had a what we call a record player, and that was about it. We didn't really have a vehicle. Uh, my grandfather grew up. They they had a vehicle, but I never asked a question. But for some reason, he stopped driving, and so we depended upon friends and relatives, and sometimes we would pay people to transport us around. Yeah, it was the New Brockton Colored High School, which meant it was segregated. Basically, when I one thing about my grandparents is that neither one of them could read or write, and so I didn't have the advantage of getting a head start on school. So I can remember my first day going to school, which I did not look forward to, and there was always this. We all walked to school. There was this mass walkathon where groups of kids would go to school, walk to school, And I remember the first day they came by to pick me up, and I was very upset because I was not looking forward to going to school. That would have taken away from my playtime. So I remember as I left the house, I threw rocks back at the house because I was upset about having to go to school. But once I got to school, I enjoyed it, had a good time. Didn't know my ABCs, didn't know my numbers. First grade, I'm not sure I even learned my ABCs in first grade. We had a teacher by the name of Mrs. Edwards, and she had a piano in our classroom that she used to play all the time. So my most vivid memory, first grade, is Mrs. Edwards playing the piano all the time. And then I did probably learn my ABCs and numbers in the first grade. Second grade, I began learning, and despite that, I can remember sometimes writing things with my hand, so I was probably cheating a little bit because I was not aware of my uh, intellect at that time. And third grade, I remember that I did extremely well in school. It was very easy, and so that was the early part of school. Uh, I have great memories of school. Had a lot of fun with school with my friends. Uh, we had good teachers who had a lot of interest and concern about us. And so I had a great time in school. Play. We played everything. Since we didn't have a lot of money, I mean, we had to improvise. We played, we made uh, toys to play with. I can remember making a kite out of newspapers, uh, sticks, and it would actually fly. We all did that. Uh, we had something called a bucket roller. Uh, it was like a 1 gallon silver can that syrup came in, and when it was empty, we would get sand, fill it full of sand, uh, put a hole through the top and bottom, and get baling wire, and we would pull that around. That would be our toy. Um, we made slingshots, uh, other things. So we we didn't have any kind of expensive special toys, but we enjoyed what we had. Yep, I played sports. I played baseball, uh, played basketball all the way through school. We were too poor to have a football team, and to be not so modest, I was quite quite good at sports. I remember I was a pitcher, and this was in little league. we had a game where the umpire was so biased on his play calling that I got so upset that I never pitched another game in my life. I became a second baseman, and but in basketball, we had a good team, and I remember when we played one of the state powerhouses in a game, and we were especially fired up, and we upset the team, and the our opponents went crazy. They were crying. They would lie on the floor, beat on the floor, because little old New Brockton High School had beat them. Back in those days, a lot of the young ladies wore high heels, and they actually took their high heels and tried to knock the windows out of our school bus. It was a way of life. It's something that didn't really dominate uh, your thought every day. It was maybe a few years later when you look back in retrospect, you could remember things like water fountains were colored. The even though the cafeteria restaurant uptown was segregated, even though it was to the disadvantage of the owner. The theater was segregated. Blacks had to sit up in the balcony, and not one thing about that is the balcony had the best seats. So as I got older, I became more aware of the racism, and I began to talk about it, discuss it, and I can recall that I was a valedictorian for my class, and we practiced graduation for about 2 weeks, and I had to give a speech during graduation, and so I developed the white superintendent of the school district was scheduled to be at our graduation, and I remember writing this fiery speech about segregation and discrimination, and my teacher, our said I could not give that speech because they were afraid of the feedback from the superintendent's office, and so I told him that I was not going to change my speech, and if he wanted me to do something different, then he would have to write it. And he wrote the speech, and I had to memorize the speech because I couldn't use notes. And I recall doing graduation, I went up my time came to give my valedictory speech, and I looked out at the audience, and my mind went completely blank. I forgot the entire speech, and I'm sure that was probably because of my distaste for having to to, do that. So I had this long introduction, and so I recognized the parents, uh, the teachers, the staff, the lunchroom staff, and I'm desperately trying to recall my speech. Finally, I had to start ad-libbing because we had been practicing for 2 weeks. All of my classmates knew uh, they knew what my speech was. They had heard it every day for 2 weeks, and they got this amazed look on their faces, like, where is this coming from? And all of a sudden, I remembered the speech, and I was able to integrate my ad-libbing into the speech, and I finished it. My teacher, he was amazed. He said, that was some trick that you pull off there.